So, good afternoon. Thank you so much to Dr. Nawalanic. He is the clinical psychologist with the University of Kansas Health System. We're so glad that you're here today and very eager to hear what you have to say with everything that's going on with our stay-at-home time and trying to get back into some sort of normal day-to-day. So if you would tell us a little bit about yourself and let's hear your presentation.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. This is clearly a very, I think it's been said to death, but an unprecedented time that we're all going through. And it's not been without its psychological impacts for sure. And personally, I'm from South Florida, and then lived in California for a number of years before moving here. I went through my doctoral training in California, and so moved here for a happy wife, happy life, and I love the area. And I've been with the University of Kansas Health System for just over about a year and a half now. And before that, I was with the Department of Corrections. I was the Director of Behavioral Health at Lansing Correctional Facility, which obviously has been really devastated by COVID. So, this is a very challenging time, and I hope to impart a little bit of, some tips and helpful insights as far as how to maintain your mental well-being through this pandemic. And currently, my position now, I'm the clinical director at the University of Kansas Health System's inpatient facility at the Strawberry Hill campus. So with that, I guess we'll dive in and get started. There have been so many areas of impact from COVID, and I don't really need to dive into all of these, but I think that everybody has seen this touch their lives in any number of ways. And one of the things that's really served to, I think, contribute most to the psychological disruption is that I would argue for the first time in history, we have a pandemic, and it's not one size fits all. If you were to get the virus, if you had 10 different people, it almost appears that you would have 10 different potential experiences and outcomes. And that doesn't help when we're looking to try to figure out the best way to respond and what we're actually dealing with. And then you take that and compound it with the disjointed decision-making and communications from different levels of government, from the federal to state to county to city. And people kind of wind up with their heads spinning, trying to figure out what's the right answer. And as far as unprecedented is concerned, this is the first time ever where whatever you believe about it, you can find a media outlet to support it. And so you've got a lot of passion that comes from this. And people get downright nasty because they have their set of beliefs. They find a media outlet that they look at as a respectable source of information. And when they're able to find confirmation for their beliefs, they're ready to go to battle with anybody who opposes their belief system. And that creates a whole cascading effect of destabilization, uncertainty, and discomfort. Right now, anxiety and depression are certainly spiking across the population. There's been a lot of misinformation, conflicting information, even facts that just evolve over time as we start to learn more and find more out. And then we have a lot of folks who are turning to maladaptive coping strategies. And so, I think there's a lot of humorous memes that came out about people working from home and not getting dressed, not having routines, drinking, in excess, which I'm pretty sure that if you look back through history, alcohol has never been cited as the real lubricant of intellect. It actually will confound our decision-making processes, fuel depression, and even spark, domestic violence, especially as we're all kind of trapped under the roof where we had those escape valves of going to work, going to school, getting away from each other to where at the end of the day, we're happy to come back together. Now we're just wondering when the heck can somebody leave? So there's a lot of challenges psychologically. Speaking of maladaptive coping, that obviously produces the question of what does effective coping look like, and why is it effective? And that's where a lot of our talk's going to focus today. Things that we want to be looking for is acknowledging your feelings. So if you are feeling depressed, if you are feeling anxious, not just repressing it, acknowledging it can be really helpful and beneficial. Utilizing coping skills like deep breathing, exercising, trying to maintain a healthy diet, and getting restful sleep. And these aren't new. This is certainly nothing that was developed as a result of COVID. These are coping strategies that behavioral health professionals have been holding the flag for years, and we've relied on these tools, and they're highly effective, provided that we're not doing a lot of the maladaptive things like looking at our phones every 10 minutes for the new update, watching every single news alert, because it used to be breaking news meant something major happened. And now we've got every single story that comes as breaking news. And so we're kind of hardwired to have this knee-jerk panic response that there's a major development, when in reality, if you would have waited till the evening news, they can parse through all of the little bits and pieces that were discovered during the day and present it in a nice package. But in the 24-hour news cycle and with the internet, it's always available, and it becomes kind of the self-sustaining, almost addictive behavior that we're afraid we're going to miss out. So when we talk about acknowledging our feelings, Carl Jung said it best, that what we resist not only persists, but will grow in size. And so part of trying to say, I'm not anxious, I'm okay, or just push it down, is that not only anxiety is kind of a warning light that pops up, like a check engine light on your car. If we ignore that, we're probably going to eventually run into some sort of a breakdown. So you want to acknowledge the warning light, figure out what is it that's causing it, and identify an active response. What can you do? And so with COVID-19, what you can do is, the obvious things, the social distancing, wearing masks, washing your hands, not touching your face. And that information has remained pretty consistent from day one. So people have been able to take an active approach to it, but we get into trying to worry about other people and the government and any number of things that are beyond our control. And the more that we focus outside of ourselves, the more disrupted we can expect to be. The other thing is, the more that you repress these emotions, you're going to find yourself, likely having high irritation, arguing with close family and friends, overeating, just inexplicable bits of anger. And so when you take it and acknowledge the feelings that you're experiencing, you can move from a defensive, passive stance to more of a calm and active engagement. And you can think of this in terms of problem versus solution focused. And we're always more effective when we're solution focused rather than just perseverating on the problem and the things we can't control. Deep breathing. This is, I can't emphasize this one enough. It's the gold standard of coping skills because it provides so many benefits. And we're going to get more into the idea of anger and anxiety and how that system works biologically. But the deep breathing is effective against a range of negative emotions. It's going to remain effective over time. It's not something you build up a tolerance to. It's always effective. And it can interrupt the anxious or the angry response cycle. And it allows our actual rational mind to catch up with our emotions. And anxiety and anger and depression, those are emotions. And so that's kind of our innate response to something. But when we slow down, take that breath, we allow the prefrontal cortex to catch up with our limbic system, which limbic system is where all your emotion is. The prefrontal cortex is the part that makes us human. It's what allows us to inhibit automatic responses. So, think about a dog when you get home, is excited, butt's wagging. It's a very body full, automatic response. When we see one another, we get excited, but we don't wiggle our whole body. We're able to say, okay, I'm going to appropriately address whoever this is. So when we talk about our anxious or angry response, it's the HPA axis is the biological process that underlies that. And it's more commonly known as the fight or flight response. I'm sure everybody's probably heard of that. And when we say HPA axis, we're talking about the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal gland, and how they interact and respond to stress. This system was highly effective back in the days when we were cavemen, roaming the earth and trying to avoid saber-toothed tigers and anything else that wanted to kill us, or hunt for something that we needed to kill to eat. So when we were walking along a path and we heard a twig snap, we turn and there's this immediate panic feeling that we get, and the HPA axis kicks into gear, and we are able to respond. It triggers the release of a number of neurochemicals like cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and they produce the following sensations: like your heart rate will increase, your blood pressure increases, your breathing becomes rapid, your fast twitch muscle response is heightened, your sight, hearing, and other senses become very sharp, your vision becomes focused in a small area. And if you think about these, they're great if something's about to come and get you, or you've got to go get something, because you're ready to run as fast as you can, quickly, or grab a club and start beating at something. Either way, you want to be able to focus your attention on one single thing, so you're going to block out all the other peripheral experience and noise because we're centered on this one thing. We don't need to be having existential thoughts at that moment. We're really in the moment trying to stay alive. And these are great responses when we're either going to run to the best of our ability to get away, climb a tree, or club something to death that we need to eat. It's less effective when we're getting it triggered by the 24-hour news cycle, by an email from our boss, by a question that our spouse asks, by something that our kid wants, homeschooling, any number of things. That's going to trigger the exact same process that if a saber-toothed tiger walked in the room and wanted to eat you. The difference between the two is that in the situations with the email and the news, you're unable to really discharge this sensation. And so if you were to, be fleeing from something, when you run as fast as you can, you discharge this chemical. And your body absorbs it, utilizes it, and it's gone, and you're okay. When you're getting an email or your spouse asks you for something and you're stressed and upset or whatever, you sit, and the more that cortisol sits in your bloodstream and isn't discharged through physical activity, that's where you get that kind of nauseous, sick, you're feeling butterfly sensation, and it's uncomfortable. And it's not adaptive. It doesn't make us feel good. It doesn't make us any more effective in the moment. If anything, it makes us less effective because our ability to focus and concentrate goes out the window. Our ability to access that prefrontal cortex, which is where we have inhibitory responses and where we're able to say, I shouldn't just start screaming at somebody right now, or I shouldn't get upset. I need to think through problem solving. All these abilities are in decline when this system is inactive or is active. So when you take that deep breath, it interrupts this cycle, and it sends messages from your lungs. There are nerve endings in your lungs that can sense the way you're breathing and how rapidly your lungs are expanding and contracting. And it sends those messages up to these neurons in your brain called mirror neurons. And they receive the message. And so when you take the deep breath, you're actively sending a message to your brain that there was a false alarm. We don't need to be upset right now. There is no inherent threat. We're okay. And that moment where your brain calms, you're able to return to better ability to process information, improved impulse control. You're able to just kind of think clearly. And so that's where the deep breathing is really the most effective. As I said there, your brain doesn't know the difference between an email or a pandemic or a saber-toothed tiger. It just knows there's an alarm and we got to go. Unfortunately, this HPA axis can become habituated. And what that means is it's basically where if you're constantly checking your phone for email updates or news updates or anything on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, it keeps getting triggered. And as long as this system continues to get triggered, your mind thinks that you're living in a jungle that's rich in saber-toothed tigers and you're constantly a danger. It doesn't understand that this is just information and that it's just upsetting and it doesn't need to be acted on right now. And so the effects of having this running, all the time is that you can have high blood pressure, you can produce artery clogging deposits, you become obese because part of the other response of the HPA axis is we start reaching for fatty, sugary foods because one of the other things that would trigger this was a paucity and unavailability of food. When that would happen, the same axis would kick into gear and our body goes into storage mode because it doesn't know when are we going to be able to eat next. So we'd better just pack on as many calories as we can so that we're able to sustain ourselves for a long period of time. Unfortunately, in the supersize era, we've got plenty of food available and we eat lots of it when we get stressed. Some people, it goes the other way and they don't eat anything. But more often than not, people want to reach for those comfort foods, that junky, crummy food that's going to make you feel worse, and it's going to make your weight gain and contribute to health issues long term. This can also cause changes in the brain that can contribute to anxiety and depression, and even increase addictive potential. So all these things, and including suppressing the immune system, they're the exact opposite of what you really want to be going on in the face of a pandemic. So now, what do? Deep breathing. So the way that deep breathing works, and I included some pictures here of what I think when people think about meditation or deep breathing, they picture somebody in a yoga pose and very zen, and that's not necessary. That's kind of, sure, it's largely part of that, but that's not an essential. You can do it in your car, you can do it in your office, you can do it right now as you're watching this. And so the way that when we talk about deep breathing, it looks like taking a deep breath, holding it for a 4 or 5 count, 3, 4, 5, and then slowly exhaling. And the difference between a good breath and a bad breath, not that there's really such thing as a bad breath, but when we're anxious, we start breathing with our chest, not diaphragmatic breathing, which you can determine if you're breathing right by putting one hand on your chest, the other hand on your belly. Take a deep breath and feel which hand is moving. You want it to be your belly hand. So part of this in 2020 is very difficult because we're very self-aware, self-conscious, and nobody wants to see their belly coming out. Everybody tries to suck it in and hide their belly because we're all in great shape. But the reality is that if you're breathing right, you should look like, if you think about an infant lying on their back, watch them breathe. Their stomach is going up and down. That's the diaphragm pushing down as you take a good deep breath, pushing the stomach up, and then going back the other way, pushing the air out. Their chest doesn't move. It takes a good 15, 20 years to learn how to breathe wrong through anxiety and stress. And if you were to try to just take breaths with your chest moving, if you do this fast enough for a little bit, you'll actually feel the exact sensation of anxiety. Because again, the same mirror neurons in your brain that can tell you to calm down will get that sensation and say, oh my gosh, what did I miss? We got to figure out what's wrong. So don't do that. Meditation is great. We don't really need to dive into that. We'll come back to a little bit later. But if we use this deep breathing technique regularly, it downregulates the central nervous system, and over time can even reverse that hyperactivity of the HPA axis, allowing you to return to yourself. Exercise. So when we talk about that HPA axis and those funky chemicals that get in our bloodstream, exercise is the best way to just discharge those. It releases feel-good chemicals in the brain, dopamine, which your bloodstream loves. It feels good. And the other thing is, once you exercise, as much as you might dread it and not want to do it, as soon as you're done, you feel an immediate sense of accomplishment. You feel good about yourself, and that boosts your self-esteem. And it can also help with what we're going to go into, I think, next, which is it can produce fatigue that's going to allow you to sleep better at night. Oh, we're going to do healthy diet next. Sorry. Exercise and healthy diet go hand in hand as well, because if you're exercising, once you start to notice that you feel a little bit better, you start to think about, hey, you know what? I lost a couple pounds. I wonder if I ate better, if I could lose a couple more. And then you start to feel even better about yourself. When we talk about, eating well, we're looking at like lean meats and fish, nuts, beans, fruits and vegetables, which when you eat a diet rich in these, there's been studies out there, there's evidence that shows that it leads to decreased levels of depression. No other treatment involved, just changing the diet can decrease someone's depression. We also want to stay hydrated. This is something that even I struggle with sometimes, is drinking eight ounce glasses of water a day. That comes out to about a half a gallon if you're trying to think of, what does the eight ounce glasses look like? But water, not soda, not coffee, actual water. It really helps to flush your body, helps with the weight loss, and helps to keep you hydrated, which your brain is a lot of water in there, so it functions better too. When we have poor nutrition, this has a very complex relationship with poor mental health. It contributes to things like body image. You feel worse about the way you look. You start making negative communications to yourself. There can also be some socioeconomic impact on this, that it costs a bit to eat healthy. And so it's difficult for some folks to adhere to this and make this lifestyle change. And when you're depressed and you're eating crummy food, when you get done eating a really, not good for you snack or meal, if you're depressed, you kind of can get a sense of, I blew it. What's the point? Whatever. And it becomes self-confirmation that you're just not worth it. What's the point? And so every single thing that you can do that's an investment in yourself, between coping effectively, eating well, exercise, these are active choices that you can make that are received by yourself. You get messages by yourself, and then you'll eventually, if you start doing enough of it and you start to look and feel better, you'll get external feedback from other people who will say, wow, you just seem better. Like, what's going on? You look like you lost some weight, and that makes us feel good too. So the next one, restful sleep. And I can't emphasize this one enough. It's essential for neurodegenerative processes in the brain. So this is basically saying that, when we're asleep, we don't even know everything that happens in our brain, but we know it's good. Some pruning of, axons and different dendrites that have been damaged, those get pruned so we have optimal functioning of our brain. It fosters mental and emotional resilience. Sleep disruptions can enhance negative thinking, depression, and anxiety. And the other thing is, when people are having trouble sleeping, it's a self-feeding animal where you don't sleep. And I think most people go to bed with one of these right next to their pillow, and they wake up and they do this, and they look and see, what time is it? And they obsess. They say, oh my gosh, it's only 1:30. I thought I'd been asleep for hours. Oh, that's it? I gotta get back to sleep. And then as soon as you have that thought and you lay down, instead of just trying to clear your mind, they start worrying about, what time is it now? Or, God forbid, you open up the wormhole of social media and start looking at your phone. I'm just going to check Instagram for a second. Next thing you know, 45 minutes have passed. Now your brain is more awake and alert. And when you try to put the phone down and go back to sleep, when you see what time it is, you get upset and you start obsessing over it and get anxious. And then you've completely blown the thing out of the water. You're not going to get back to sleep anytime soon like that. So when we talk about improving our sleep, there's a concept of sleep hygiene. And what this means is, number one, you want to only use your bed for sleep or sexual activity. Anything more than that, and this has been really a problem when we've shifted to working from home. People get up, they just pull their computer up in bed, or before they go to bed, they put the laptop on and they just sit in bed and they do work. They do some emails, do some this, and your brain is processing all that information. And as we talked before a little bit about how the brain does this amazing job of pairing stimuli and trying to make sense of things, it looks at it and says, oh, I kind of thought this bed was where we went to sleep, but apparently this is our office now. And so your brain, when you start doing work in bed, it starts to think, oh, well, we better wake up. We got to do work. And so one of the things that you can do is, try to refrain from any screen time for at least an hour before you intend to go to bed. That includes tablets, cell phones, computer screens, television, any of it. Get that out of the way an hour before you're going to go to bed. Because the screens kind of have like a blue light that comes out of them a lot, and our brain pairs that with sunrise, which the sky is blue. Again, caveman. Really unfortunate for us now, but it was great back then because you never knew what predators woke up at that time too. So you want to be awake. The other part is I hear a lot of times people talk about, oh, I go to sleep with the TV on. It helps me to relax. Well, unfortunately, another caveman process that's still keeping us wired today is that our brain was set to constantly monitor the environment around us, because when we lived outside or in caves, predators that could come and eat us, we needed to hear they were coming. So your brain is constantly paying attention to the infomercial that comes on after the last program that you were watching or whatever. And you're not going to get to that deep level of sleep that we really need. Another thing is, if we're looking at our substance use, alcohol, sure, a lot of people think, oh, it helps me fall asleep. I have a glass of wine after dinner or before bed. Yeah, it helps you go to sleep, but it produces a more shallow sleep, and you'll wake up in the middle of the night, if not just to go to the bathroom, just in general, your brain, you'll have a lower level of sleep, and it's less productive as far as that neurogenerative piece that we're talking about earlier. The other piece, meditation, if we can do the deep breathing and do meditation, just 10 minutes. I'm not saying you have to become some professional yogi or anything, but meditation is simply sitting in quiet introspection, doing the deep breathing, where you take a deep breath, hold it for a 4 or 5 count, exhale, wait till you have to breathe again, do that again, hold it for a 4 or 5 count, slowly exhale. Try to clear your mind. Know that thoughts will come. Imagine them as being kind of on a conveyor belt. The thought came, it doesn't have any control over you. Acknowledge it and let it go. You don't have to act on it now. It's time for sleeping, not for sending one more email, worrying about what's on tomorrow's schedule. You'll be better if you just let it all go. Get to sleep. If you do it in the morning when you wake up for 10 minutes, you can set a positive intention for your day. I'd like to be more thoughtful. I'd like to be more engaged. I'd like to be more considerate. I'd like to be a better version of myself. Anything that you can set that's positive. And then at the end of the day, before you go to bed, you can reflect and think, how did I do with regard to that intention? Was I better? Was I more caring? Was I considerate? And it's kind of just an overall practice of self-improvement through calm and deep breathing. You can also, avoid eating within the hour before going to bed too, because sometimes when we eat too close to bed, we have really weird dreams or nightmares. So if you can avoid eating that hour before bed, that'll help you to stay asleep. Also, reading's great too. Now, lots of people have been trapped at home. I mean, fortunate to be home with their children. A lot of people like to ask, what do I do with them? And the reality is that if you think this has been disruptive for you, imagine being a child who is unsure about the world ordinarily, because they're little, they're very vulnerable. You want to create a safe place for them to be able to ask questions or share concerns. You want to answer their questions honestly. If you don't know an answer, it's okay to not know. In fact, it can be a really good thing for you to acknowledge that and say, hey, why don't we look for this information together? You want to always try to use words and concepts to their developmental language level so that they're able to understand what you're saying. The last thing you want to do is confuse them more by trying to talk over their head and appear that you're some grand expert. And help them find accurate and up-to-date information, which it's been very difficult through this to do it. Most importantly, be prepared to repeat information to younger kids. Don't get irritated with them. This is something they're trying to come to grips with as well. Their whole life has been completely uprooted, just like yours. And they don't necessarily, it's not that they're not listening to you when you tell them the answer. It's just reassuring for them to know that you have an answer. If you think about when you were a kid, if there was a really bad storm or something was going on, you were scared, you went to your parents and you wanted them to be calm. You wanted them to, you had this, even if it was just an illusion that they had control, it made you feel better. So it can be really helpful to handle your anxiety through some deep breathing and maybe exercise and whatever, and just getting your mind clear before you talk to them, so that you're in a calm place and they see that and they can absorb your calm, because Lord knows they're catching all the frustration. They're picking up on every single wavelength you've got. The trick to that is, nobody's perfect and nobody's been prepared for this. So as long as you're doing your best, give yourself a pass. Oh, there you go. For other tips, give yourselves credit. Nobody's perfect and there's no right way to go through something that's completely unprecedented. Every day is an opportunity to get better. So give yourself, look at everything as a learning opportunity. Find the positives in the situation. I think that there are positives in this. I know it's hard to think of it in that way, but how much more appreciative are we of our interpersonal connections, our relationships, our abilities to do the things that before we used to say, oh, what are the best plans? Canceled plans, now, wouldn't you love to go do any one of the stupid things that you used to hate doing? I think that we really have a better appreciation of how much we all mean to one another. And so it's important to check in with yourself and know that it is okay to not be okay. And if you try these coping strategies, and I mean really try them, I think you're going to find that you're a little better able to cope. You feel a little better. Things don't seem as awful as they might have been. But if you are still feeling at a loss and you're having any sort of suicidal thoughts, any intent of self-harm, or you're noticing that you're drinking way too often and it's not just something you're doing for fun, you're really feeling that you need that drink, it's more of a compulsion and you're finding that that's the only way to get through, it might be time to reach out for professional help. Thank goodness through platforms like Zoom, telehealth, and all the different other platforms that are available, mental health providers are available in numbers never before, because we've all had to shift over to this platform. So if you're concerned about coming out to see somebody in face-to-face, you don't have to. We can see just like this. It's not without its limitations, but it is fantastic in terms of being able to provide for help in this situation. And inpatient facilities, there are a number of safeguards in place. We are working around the clock to take care of patients and to make sure that we're managing our COVID risk here with our inpatient population. So it's not, I think a lot of people look at the University of Kansas health system and think, oh, that's where all the COVID patients are. And that's true, but they're on dedicated units. They're not intermixed with other procedures. They're not here, in the inpatient unit. This is not a COVID positive unit. If we have COVID positive patients, they're separated. We have special areas. So we are doing our best to preserve and protect our staff, our patients, and the community. And we're still here to answer those behavioral health calls, for people that are in crisis. So all that crammed into, I think, just came in at over a half an hour. I think that about covers it. So I don't know if anybody has questions, or if there's anything that I went through very quickly there that you'd like me to go back through and slow it down, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Nawalnic, right?
Sure, yeah, but Greg's fine.
You gave us a lot of really good things to think about. Do we have any questions out there, or you want a little more information on what we heard just now? You know, a lot of it are things that we've heard before, but it's so good to remember, just like the deep breathing, how important that is to all of our health, not just mental health. So it was really good to hear all of that, and the explanations that you gave all made it make sense.
Good. Yeah, and
Mhm.
this is very difficult. And I think, this presentation was created back when we were kind of in the height of things. And now I almost think that it's more important as we're moving towards opening and all these things that are going on, all the changes, because I feel like there's even more uncertainty now than there was then. And it's a whole new set of problems. And I think that people, yeah, I don't know. I think that everyone is very stressed and confused and trying to do the best they can. But one of the things I would encourage everybody is, let's just try to understand that there are different perspectives and opinions, and avoid the personal attacks, and try to avoid just getting downright nasty with one another, because we have to ostensibly believe that everybody's doing their level best.
So, Dr. Greg, we did have a question come in. Can you help us understand how we can work together to try and understand some of those differences? And for the people that are not taking the seriousness of wearing like the face mask, I know myself, I went into the grocery store, and if you encounter people that do not have them on, I'm almost taking that as you don't value me as much as a person.
That's the temptation. And I think that, this is very unfortunate, because I feel like, without turning this into a political discussion, there are very much two camps. And there are certain factions who, and I don't know who's right. That's the thing. I think that, um, you know, a number of people have been blissfully preserved financially through this situation, but other people have seen their livelihoods crumble around them, and they're itching to get back to business, because they're looking to have, utilities are going to get turned off, rent's due, mortgage payments are due. And while there, initially there was some kind of gray area and little leeway and understanding, that we're returning to business as usual. People want to get paid for things. And so um, if you give me 10 people randomly assigned out of the community, you have 10 different experiences of this pandemic. And everybody's experience, if you look at it in a postmodern sense, is valid. And the difference is that, in the absence of having consistent, clear scientific evidence, and unfortunately, when we have media outlets and certain factions who choose to discount information and discount science, and there's enough, folks that are online creating havoc in terms of conspiracy theories and all these things, it is literally crazy making. And I think that, as long as, if you feel that this is a hoax, that's your choice. But I would hope that people at least respect one another's space. I would say, don't take it personally. It's hard to personalize. I mean, it's hard not to personalize it when you look at it in terms of all the adjustments that we've all tried to make. And when we see scenes like, over the weekend, there's a certain amount of trauma that we've all endured. And when we see large gatherings of people, there's a knee-jerk response of, oh my God, like, what is that? What happened? But everybody makes their choices. And unfortunately, there are umpteen different media outlets, and you can find confirmation for whatever your specific belief system is. So I would say, if you feel this is still something very real and scary, as most, I think, scientific community does, wear your mask and know that will minimize your risk somewhat. Stay 6 feet away from people at least, maybe even more if possible. If you see somebody coming down the grocery aisle, go back out and go around. It's hard. And the hand washing and sanitizing, I mean, it is a lot. And it's upsetting that we don't have any real sense of community unity. And so I would say the best advice I have is just try not to personalize it. Just know that everybody is doing the best they can with the information that they have at any given time.
Thank you so much. Dr. Greg, we really do appreciate you coming and joining us today. It was great, great information. I know I've taken away a lot of notes, so we really do appreciate your time and talent.
Oh, please.
Stay
It's my
safe.
pleasure.
And thank you,
You too.
for everyone joining, and we'll make sure that we share this out. Again, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Uh-huh.